He saw Bom Bom. And I was like, priest, adjust thy collar, okay? Breath of Life. Everyone's talking about this movie, so why don't we? Welcome to this review. Today we're talking Breath of Life, and it's currently streaming on Prime Videos, and this is an Amazon original. Breath of Life is a historical drama heavily promoted as a faith-based movie, and it's got a runtime of 115 minutes. It's written and directed by Bibi Shashore, and Bibi is such a careful filmmaker. Let me just tell you guys, one of my all-time guilty pleasure films is Banana Island Ghost. I watched that movie so many times. I'm sure I have some of the dialogue verbatim, and I was really bummed when it was taken off of Netflix. So I would just say that loosely faith-based movies are really Bibi's shtick. Now, let me register my bias about this movie and this genre as a whole. I'm not a fan of faith-based movies. I would have qualified me saying that by going ahead to say you can trust me to review this movie on its own merit or its own basis as art. However, that qualification would presuppose that I accept this movie's categorization as faith-based, which do I? Does it qualify for that nomenclature? So you tell me in the comments below if you think I agree with that categorization. The synopsis: Timmy, a gifted clergyman, no, not Timmy. Timmy, a gifted clergyman, turns into an old lonely curmudgeon when his family is tragically taken from him until Elijah, a humble man with big dreams of becoming a priest, comes into his life. Through Elijah, Timmy not only learns to live again, but also realizes purpose for all his gifts and wealth. Okay, now, what is this movie about? Spanning a period of approximately 48 years, Breath of Life follows the story of a priest with an incredible mind and physical and mental attributes, Reverend Timmy, who loses his faith after a tragic event that scars him irredeemably. 35 years later, Timmy's somewhat defunct existence collides with a young man, Elijah, who himself shares the same dreams that Timmy has long discarded, that is, of becoming a priest. After a rough and shaky start, the two develop a bond through their interactions, and gradually the layers are peeled back and each man comes to mean more to the other than either had ever anticipated. The story culminates in a surprising turn of events that changes the course of these two lives forever. That's the story of Breath of Life. Now, just a small reminder, please don't forget to like this video as you watch, and then of course when you're done, share and subscribe to this channel, turn on the notifications so you can get notified about all other videos that I post. Thank you. Now, as a general comment, and I'll expand on this more towards the end of the film, but let me just say that this is an incredible looking film. The pieces are put together very carefully, very intricately, and it has a lot of heart. Also, the heart of this film and the filmmaker is in the right place. Let's just go straight to talking about the films, what I liked, what worked, what was done so well, so beautifully. And there's a lot to recommend this film. Number one, Ibadan. Ibadan is such a hub of like art and culture that I'm surprised that I don't see more movies set in Ibadan. So it was so good to see Ibadan in this film, and I really loved it. Just anything that is not Lagos, anything that is not Lagos. I'm tired of Lagos. The cinematography, guys, this was a beautiful film. It was so the beautiful colors, stunning landscapes. This movie was a very aesthetically pleasing film. The sets were realistic, and again, the locations were really, really beautiful. I couldn't overstate that. And so they really nailed the aesthetic for this movie. The costume, the makeup, all that stuff was great. So again, this is a great looking film. So there was nothing in how this movie looked that was jarring to take me out of the experience as far as how it looked. Casting and performances. As a general comment, I'm impressed with how just really more and more filmmakers are letting new faces shine in their productions, while the more established and popular ones sort of take a backseat, right? So we saw that very recently in Blood Vessel, that was mostly carried by new faces, and this one was a good mix of both. Next thing I love, Demola Adedoyin. Demola is one of my favorite actors. Let's start there, and maybe I have a bias. We saw him in October 1. I think that was the first time most of us saw him, and he was excellent. And now here he is again. And when I saw him and saw what time period this was, I was like, this man lives in Independence era, okay? So he was really magnificent here. I think that his performance really wrung my heart in a million places. Wherever, at the points where he carried this story, he was so eloquent in everything that he expressed. He just character was so great, and then his performance really carried that character. Tinamba was great. This is different from her usual roles, and her role here was really minimal, but she popped whenever she was on screen. Her character was so protective of Elijah's character, almost like a mother figure, and I really liked that. Bimbo Manuel, he's also a really terrific actor. His role here was also minimal, but of course he was great as he always is. Ekwe Dewo, now I was skeptical when I saw her, but I've got to say that she was absolutely perfect for this role. She was absolutely perfect. And Genoveva Ume, I was thinking, is her name really Genoveva? I've never heard that name, so I was like, could it be her name is Genevieve? And she was like, that one's already taken. You don't want to compete with Genevieve. Anyway, I'm messing with you guys. Genoveva, I hope I'm saying her name right. Genoveva Ume as Elijah's girlfriend, that's Anna. I've never seen her before, but she acquitted herself so well. Her character started out very mischievous and irreverent, and it worked for me. I mean her character until it didn't, and I'll explain. But the actress is absolutely beautiful, so I don't blame Elijah. Samba Sanzeribe, he gave a really good performance as always. He was this swaggering, cold-blooded cult leader, Baby Fire. That's his character's name. Although his aesthetic, I've got to say, it was straight up 70s gangster, but ignore me. And I'm wondering, has he been typecast? Sambasa? I think so. All around, I think the performances were creditable for the most part. Notice I haven't mentioned some of the prominent names here, and I'll get to that. The sound, I loved a lot of the soundtrack. I wish there was more choral music because that's my favorite kind of music, but I like the soundtrack for the most part. The score, it was a lot in some places, but it was still not enough for me to feel like it was terrible or anything. The last movie I reviewed, the score really frustrated me, but this was not that. This was just fine. There was such great attention to detail for the most part. There was, of course, some things that stood out that weren't great as far as detail, so not a perfect score on that, but I'll try not to nitpick. I'm in the Christmas spirit, as you can imagine, so no nitpicking here today. As far as the directing, I think some aspects were great. The staging, the blocking, the framing, camera movements, those were so well done, but we'll get to the but. The story, the premise, and to an extent the plot, these things worked. I, however, had issues with the structure, and I'll touch on that later. This movie had some seriously gut-wrenching, heart-rending, emotional beats that actually hit where it hurt. I didn't cry though, because I'm not a hurt cry person. I'm a happy cry person. I'm more likely to cry when I'm overwhelmed with joy than when I'm overwhelmed with grief or sadness. So that's just me, but I get it when I hear people were like blubbering and everything. The first act of this movie, I think it had a tight grip on the suspense and the dramatic tension. The pacing did start to drag around the middle, and I don't think it ever quite recovered, even if it did start to like gallop towards the end. But the first act of this movie really had the tension in control, and I was so impressed by that. By the way, small whatever, why did Reverend Timmy shoot Baby Fire? I think he should have let him suffer, like he needed to suffer, you know, but whatever. I wish I had made him suffer. Now, I'm mixed on the love story. It worked until it didn't. However, they did have some sweet and natural scenes between the couple. So, you know, there's some things that really worked with the love story. I believed they're falling in love, and then when things started to come apart with the parents, I really believed that grief and desperation, and there were truly scenes between them that broke my heart. And just all together in this film, there were some really poignant scenes. I did not think that the adoption story was necessary, but I'm going to say that I thought it was sweet. So I'm happy that it was there. I have a very sweet spot for stories like that. Special mention in this movie, the inhaler as a character. That inhaler needs its own its own screen credit. Honestly, throughout the movie, I kept shouting, somebody get that kid a maintenance inhaler. And PSA, if you are asthmatic, this is a rescue inhaler. This is a maintenance inhaler. Please get your doctor to not have you abusing this inhaler, okay? This is a rescue inhaler. I know that people puff on this all day long. It's wrong. Please don't use this as a maintenance inhaler. There are different types. There's this one. You usually see it in the purple color, but this is a maintenance inhaler. I just want to say that. So please stop using rescue inhalers as your daily maintenance inhaler, okay? And also, if you can afford it, try to get a home nebulizer. I have mine somewhere there if you have asthma that really stresses you out and impacts on your life. That was my little PSA, but I think that the asthma thing was the whole asthma was a good setup for that crisis at the end, even if at some point I thought it was slightly overdone. Now, let's get to, look, there's so much more that worked, okay? So this is just me going through all the things that really stood out to me, but as I've said, this was a really incredible looking film, and apart from just the look, the tone, and all of that, there's so many beautiful things about this film, and I'm all for all the people who are completely gung-ho. However, I'm going to tell you the things that did not work for me. Now, with some films, the problems are like in your face, they are glaring. But with this film, like I said, Bibi is such a careful filmmaker, right? So this is a classic case of the devil is in the details. And when I say details, I mean tiny, tiny details, like in the lines, okay? There were things that, as much as I tried to stay immersed in this story, they kept throwing me off and throwing me out of the narrative. So let's start with the narration / the narrator. Right from just the beginning, I felt like the narration did not have this naturalistic flow to the sentences. Sometimes they were oddly or weirdly structured, and the way they were arranged with regards to the corresponding shots on screen just did not flow properly. And then the narration itself, it straddled the line between narration and exposition, and it made me wonder just what kind of film this would have been without that narration. And this one could have been intentional, but the narrator / narration gave away the ending pretty much, which made the whole asthma crisis fall flat at the end, because we knew from the beginning that he not only survived, he thrived, so then there were a few attention to detail problems, both in technical aspect but also in the storytelling. Ekwe, there were gel nails, but we said no nitpicking, Christmas spirit and all that, so let's keep it moving. Reverend Timmy, he went without food, that's fine, but water for 9 days he was lying out there, and you would imagine that during the day the sun came out and it would be scorching. The one that really bothered me towards the end, and I'm not saying that we should have seen a play-by-play, but Reverend Timmy went to die, and this was like cataclysmic, I would say, moment of this film that wrapped everything up. Wouldn't it have been hilarious if he had died and then they found his body 1 week later when they couldn't use the organs anymore? I don't know if he had done any tests to ensure that his organs were healthy, his lungs were healthy, and also, most importantly, that he was a match. He's not a family member. Pearl, don't nitpick! There's more, but I've chosen restraint. So let's talk about the character though of Reverend Timmy. I think that character could have been fleshed out more. So I did not feel like I knew him. I didn't feel like I knew his motivations. I didn't really get with his actions and justifications, because again, I didn't really understand this character. Do we know why he decided to join the priesthood in the first place? This man could very comfortably have decided to join NASA, be a NASA scientist, right? It's not this, because this is that kind of movie, because it's a faith-based film, it would have been good to know what his choice, this particular choice that was a strong undercurrent throughout the movie, what it was based on. I didn't know why he decided to return home. I didn't know why he didn't leave after the tragedy that happened. And like I said, not because I just want these details in themselves, but just so I would feel like I knew this character better. I don't know where his renewed belief came from at the end of the movie, and so I didn't really buy his justifications towards the end. There's just a lot about the character that didn't really cohere. Now, Wale Ojo, his acting, his performance in this movie. Remember when I talked about the directing and said, but this is the but. I don't think that the directing of the actors was the best in this movie. Like I said, other aspects of directing worked so great, but the actual directing of the actors, it was not the best. I've seen some of these actors be better. Take Wale Ojo, for instance. Normally, he's a phenomenal actor, right? But here, he's playing of the gruff, angry man. It often came across as a bit cartoonish, and that bothered me. His rage for the most part was unconvincing. It just felt like he was playing angry, and so some aspects that were supposed to emote pain and anger and grief, they just came across, they ended up being comedic. I thought that was a shame. Sam Dede's acting suffered the same fate, and I think he was really unconvincing in his role. As for Chimeze Imo, his performance lacked something, and I couldn't quite put a finger on it, and in the end I just wondered if he was the best fit for this role. Let's talk about the relationships in this movie. The two main relationships, Timmy and Elijah, and then Elijah and Anna. Let's start with Timmy and Elijah. I thought at the beginning of their relationship was very well crafted. I thought that structurally it might have worked better if this story started with Elijah gradually learning about Timmy, and then we have these dips into the past. I don't know how long their relationship spanned. I think it was 5 years, and if that's the case and I'm right, if it wasn't that long, it's got its own set of problems, and if it was that long, it's got its own set of problems. So I'll go with 5 years. the issues I have with that is that, first of all, I don't think that enough was done to justify Timmy's thawing towards Elijah, and eventually he's just regaining his zest for life. I didn't see that process. I really didn't. And so when we got to the end, the strength and depth of his feelings, it didn't really feel earned to me. It ended up looking like Timmy, he had either just grown bored of being angry the way he was bored of being in the water and holding his breath, or was it just that he had been lacking human companionship, which again does not really make sense because he had his butler all these 35 years and then Elijah joined his household. Guys, 35 years is a fucking long time, you know. So for somebody who has been in that state that we met him for 35 years, the process of bringing him back to his humanity, I don't think I saw it. I didn't. It might have helped if Elijah had shared some of his own history and personal story, especially since we had the adoption story coming up. I would have liked it if these people sort of helped each other heal, because I would like to believe that Elijah himself had his own trauma that he came into this story with, not having parents and all that. Also, if it was 5 years, the lives of these characters did not actually progress or evolve in any way, and they just seemed kind of static. Here's a tiny nitpick. When Elijah came out of the coma, I don't know how he knew to call Timmy dad. Now, the love story, that's the second relationship, Elijah and Anna. First of all, that relationship just started off on the wrong foot for me because they immediately showed me people eating rice, which personally, rice is my weakness. But also, when I was watching this movie, I was coming off a 38-hour fast. I hadn't broken my fast yet, and so I was just not inclined to like this. Okay, on a serious note, this couple had a few really good moments and they had some really great scenes together, okay, but ultimately the love story did not work for me. On the surface, it worked, you know, but there were these glitches and static in the subtleties of their conversation that it just kept making the whole thing feel insincere to me, and I'm going to lay the blame 100% on the writing, specifically the dialogue between this couple. My first raised eyebrow moment was when Elijah quoted scripture at Anna, give not thy strength to women or to the thing that destroyeth kings. I was like, come through, red pill, guys, do your thing. I hear you, bros. Yeah, I know what year it was, but I'm still gonna say that was fucking sexist. Then he hits us with the false humility, false self-effacement of calling himself a houseboy when he knows good and well that he's the house manager.
For a house manager, you're not very smart, are you?
No, sir. I mean, yes, sir.
I don't know. False humility always comes across disingenuous to me. So, like I said, it's in the tiny, tiny lines of dialogue and details between them. On the surface, the love story looks great. And then this next point overlaps with the faith angle. And I have a lot to say about maybe not a lot to say about the faith angle, but in this, soon after they met, she told him she doesn't do the God thing. And what was my brother's response? He said, I'm going to marry her. He saw Bom Bom. And I was like, priest, adjust thy collar, okay? So I don't know, these people live in two different worlds. And then there's Anna, the character. You know, I was rooting for them, but in just a short series of events, this character completely dismantled every regard I had for her, that it really affected my feelings about the love story ultimately. First of all, this was a character that had serious problems with boundaries and respect for other people's autonomy. In the beginning, when she barged into that house uninvited and demanded entry, I knew we're supposed to think that that was cute, but it did raise my hackles. I'm just gonna say that was when I started looking at her sideways, and it turns out I was right to be wary of her. And so in the climactic moments of the second act, when she displayed such just a fascinating range of pathological behaviors, I went so violently off this character that nothing that happened after redeemed her for me. Was it the entitlement? Was it the complete disregard for everyone's boundaries, her boyfriend, his father figure, and even her own boundaries? Because when did she become so passionately about this pastor wife life? I don't know, but all of a sudden she carried the matter for head. And then when she didn't get her way, she displayed just such a real cruelty by invoking his family. And that moment was just so unbelievably ugly, and she wasn't done. The very next scene, she then proceeded to minimize and display absolute disregard for the relationship between Timmy and Elijah. And that was particularly bad because Elijah had no family, you know, and then she just said the words that she said, the way she said them, and then the way she then went on to dismiss Timmy's grief. And you know, that point was not surprising, because another thing that had raised my brows earlier was when she first heard about Timmy and how he grieves his family, and she fetishized his grief by calling it beautiful. When that happened, I remember saying, but then this is how it plays out in the end. And then finally, she spoke the truth about how she sees that relationship between she and Elijah, that Elijah, she did not consider him her equal. I've never seen so many red flags just pop up all at once. And then that was not even all, because in a final show of just her disregard again for people's boundaries, she barged through Elijah's sexual boundaries, even though he had long established that his sexual purity was of utmost importance to him, but she didn't care. But then the lung collapse happened and saved his virginity. Praise be. So yeah, the love story was not for me. I thought that if anything, that character needed therapy, not a wedding band. Still, I'm going to say that the love story was shot beautifully and sentimentally, and I'm going to give them that. The faith angle. In the end, I believe that the faith was just a plot device. It was completely unconvincing. In Elijah's day-to-day, I saw nothing about his spirituality. Eventually, I took it that he just wanted to be a priest and to own a church. That was it. But as far as his personal convictions, I saw no evidence of that. And he even implied as much. I was skeptical about the ending of this movie and how it summed up the entire plot. And this is where I think that me and most of you who are watching are going to come to a real parting of the ways, because maybe the way we see life very differently through this particular ideological framework. The way Timmy rationalized the events of this entire movie, God couldn't save his family, couldn't heal his broken heart, couldn't heal the boy he called son, couldn't touch the heart of one of the bereaved families in the hospital to, make that donation. But when he said he was giving up and was ready to die, God happily obliged and stepped in. And I'm like, that was where he chose to act. If you know me, you already know that I'm going to really raise my eyebrows about that. So let me leave that part alone for the people who... Okay. And so, if for no other reason than just the fact that I'm so diametrically opposed to the ideological framework of this film, but I'm going to say that that's reason enough for me to say that this movie was clearly, I was clearly not the audience for this film. And that's okay. Like I said in the beginning, I can still talk about this movie on its artistic merit, okay? And so just my general thoughts at the end of this movie, my general summation is that I wish that the faith aspect had been handled better and more respectfully and with greater depth, since that was how this movie was being positioned. I could have gotten with that, even if whether I believe or not doesn't matter, but I would have gotten with that immersion into what the characters actually feel and believe and their personal convictions. I didn't see it. There was just enough appeal to the pathos and sentimentality of religion without really committing. I didn't buy the saving of the church as a conflict. The church is not a building, as a lot of Christians would tell you, and so there was really no need to lay siege to this building. And from a political standpoint, I did not like how the mechanisms of colonialism were employed to resolve this situation, and I don't know if that was something to be celebrated. That said, it was very much in keeping with Timmy's character. So altogether, this was a simple story, but it lacked depth, and I know that there's going to be a lot of disagreement here, but I said it, and I did not stay engaged much after the first act. You'll like this movie if you like lightly faith-based movies, but also, like I said, this was a really aesthetically pleasing film, so you're also going to like this movie on that basis. All right, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe if you like my content. Turn on notifications to see my upcoming videos. And if you did not like this particular review for obvious reasons and you need a palette cleanser, go watch my Christmas decoration video that I put up last. That would be a beautiful palette cleanser for you because it was a lot of fun to make. And also I have a lot of other reviews you can watch. I expect a lot of pushback here, so I've made my peace with that. I might have another video before the end of the year, but if not, Merry Christmas to you guys. Thank you again so much. I don't know if this is my last video of the year, but if it is, then I've just got to say, no, it's not my last video of the year. Come off that. It might not be for maybe I'll do some throwback. I think I'll do some throwback, but I just want to really say thank you to you guys for your presence here, for your engagement, for the comments, the likes, the shares, for all the love, for all your kindness, and for just keeping everything so copacetic and respectful so far. Thank you. What do I always say? You have the right to an incredible viewing experience, so never settle. Thank you. I always feel so relieved when I'm done. Can you tell? Because this thing is not, it's hard, I know I do it like it's easy, but it's hard. And then when I'm done, I always feel like, okay, bye.